Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today to discuss what is a really exciting topic of artificial intelligence. I'm Devin Ryan, Director of Financial Technology Research at Citizens JMP Securities. I'm going to be your host and moderator for the next 45 minutes as we talk through the results of Citizens' recent survey, AI Trends in Financial Management. I'm going to let my esteemed panelists introduce themselves in a minute here, and then we're going to talk about the speed at which companies are adopting artificial intelligence, how they're applying it today, some of the potential risks that we're following and they should be aware of. And then also, if you'd like to ask questions, please put those into the Q&A pane, and we'll try to get to as many of those as we can throughout our conversation here. If we don't get to your questions, we'll consolidate the answers and then send those out to our attendees. So with that, would love to introduce my esteemed panelists here. And I'll kick it off, and they can give kind of a self-introduction before we get into the conversation. So I'll start with my colleague, Beth Johnson here. Beth, can you start off with the introduction?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Thanks, Devin. So delighted to be here today, everyone. I'm the Chief Experience Officer at Citizens. You may ask what that means. So my job here is really to build capabilities for the bank, so across the organization. So data and analytics is part of my team. I am the executive sponsor of our generative AI efforts on our executive leadership team. I also have digital experience in design, enterprise payments, marketing and comms, things like agile transformation. So really it's about building capabilities and technologies in partnership with our technology teams for the future. So delighted to be here and excited on this topic.
Thank you. Bill?
Hey, Devin, and thanks for having us. Excited to be here. Bill Gold, Head of Data and Analytics for the Commercial Bank, also Head of AI and ML. So anywhere across the customer lifecycle, there's AI that's helping unlock growth and efficiencies across Citizens, and we're delivering AI that our business partners embrace.
Thanks, Bill. Gaurav.
Thanks, Devin. Good to be here. I'm Gaurav Tiwari, the co-founder and partner at Omega Venture Partners. Omega is a leading technology VC firm here in Silicon Valley, and our focus is on investing in early growth stage private companies that are providing revolutionary solutions using AI and machine learning. Back in 2020, we established Omega as the first US venture capital firm that's thematically focused on AI and machine learning applications. And fortunately, we were early to recognize that AI is shaping the fourth industrial revolution, as the World Economic Forum calls it, and ushering in this tsunami of innovation. Our investment strategy focuses on, we see AI as the biggest driver of value creation for the foreseeable future across technology and across the economy. And we really put our efforts into building a purpose-built platform with the expertise, credibility, relationships, and acumen to identify and access the next generation of technology market leaders.
Hey, thanks. So I guess let's just get into it right now. In late 2023, Citizens ran a survey to 200 CFOs at mid-sized companies and financial leaders at private equity firms. If you haven't had a chance to look at the survey yet, it can be found by using the QR code here up on the screen. The survey primarily covered traditional artificial intelligence applications, but with so much going on and coverage around generative AI as well, I think it's just going to be helpful if we can maybe set some definitions here for the audience and maybe differentiate what companies have been implementing in terms of really AI for years, and then what we're just at the forefront of right now. So Beth, maybe I'll start with you. If you could just give a little bit of the definition of how you think about artificial intelligence, and I think that'll help level set the discussion here.
So as I think about artificial intelligence, I really think about it as a discipline. So think about it broadly as something like biology has many sub-disciplines. AI is an overarching discipline for a type of technology that really allows computer systems to perform tasks that are typically thought of as human tasks. But that can be a variety of things. So it could be RPA. Do I automate a operational process? It could be traditional machine learning. It can be predictive analytics on existing data sets that I have, as well as robotics and other areas. What we're finding then is the tweak in Gen AI, which is another sub-discipline of AI overall, that's where you are actually going into generation. So the generative AI tools use large language models to either generate text or images or audio based on sets of data that they've been trained on historically. As I started to really first think about this topic, one of the examples I used of the difference with Gen AI and traditional AI methods is if you think about the human brain and you think about what you've learned over your entire life, if I put a piece of paper in front of you with text on it and ask you to interpret it, you use that based on past learning, not necessarily just on what's in front of you. That's really what these Gen AI tools are doing as it interprets the data and as it is able to generate content.
Great, really helpful, Beth. So let's just get into a little bit of the data associated with the Citizens AI survey. The survey results showed that private equity firms are adopting AI faster than mid-sized companies. 97% of PE financial leaders surveyed said that they're already using AI compared to 76% of mid-sized CFOs. Gaurav, maybe starting with you, just on the reaction here, is this consistent with what you're seeing in the market today, both around adoption, and then if we zoom out a few years, where do you think adoption goes from here?
Yeah, well, I have to say 97% just in absolute terms sounds a bit high, perhaps aspirational, but I think even aspirational is indicative of where it's going. If you look at kind of the overall trajectory of AI, it's been an overnight success that's been 60 years in the making. But there is no doubt that ChatGPT and generative AI, that journey from going from 0 to 100 million users is in 2 months set an absolute record in terms of speed of adoption of any new technology in known history. And I think it's a revelation of AI's pervasive appeal. At the same time, we're noting that global AI spending conservatively is expected to reach over 300 billion in the next 2 years. And that's, about close to a 29% CAGR. So all the data points triangulate to the fact that there's a lot of value in this technology that's driving informed adoption and experimentation, perhaps, before adoption. The early indications have been very promising in terms of what AI can do in today's workplace. Anywhere from 20 to 60% of a knowledge worker's job lends itself to improved productivity and partial automation of tedious and repetitive tasks. And early adopters who are experimenting or piloting AI and generative AI in their enterprises or companies are reporting anywhere from 35% to 40% higher innovation and productivity. So these are, really striking numbers. And while 97% does sound high, I can tell you that, as a VC firm ourselves, we are deeply thoughtful in terms of, first, how AI impacts our existing portfolio companies. Second, how, we've really been very thoughtful about new investment evaluation and thinking about AI roadmaps and plans that will impact the future trajectory of new investments we make, as well as applying AI to our internal operations. Just as a small example, I'll mention at Omega, we've invested in building a full-fledged data science team, and that has led to a suite of functionality, both around our ability to aggregate massive amounts of data to inform finding and evaluating new investments, but also in automating and augmenting our internal workflows, right? Due diligence work streams, company evaluation and assessment analysis, and then also advisory. Simply put, Devin, it's become abundantly clear that AI isn't just an efficiency booster, it's a game changer in scalability. Our staff is punching far above their weight as a result of the AI tools that are giving them, I would say, it's like Iron Man. When you put the Iron Man suit on and it just augments your capabilities in a very meaningful and differentiated way. Secondly, I think if I look at a macro level of where this is going, it's certainly very clear to me that the future competitive dynamics between companies is not going to be over resources or manpower, but it's going to be defined by superior data and AI prowess. So I think there's very good reasons why AI adoption and experimentation is happening. It doesn't surprise me at all that PE firms are taking a lead. I would say that from an investment perspective, in terms of our day-to-day operations, while AI gives us a massive scale, speed, agility, and superpowers, as I mentioned, we still feel that human judgment, pattern recognition, and domain expertise is indispensable, certainly in what we do. So we see AI as truly that Iron Man metaphor. It's not a replacement for our staff, but it certainly makes our staff an order of magnitude more productive in what they can accomplish and empowers them. It's also, I would say, from the investor side, given how noisy the AI landscape has gotten, we think a lot about what is the key determinant of investment success. And in our mind, it is more important today than it has ever been to separate the wheat from the chaff, because just the sheer volume and number of AI companies that have been formed over the last 12 to 18 months is mind-boggling.
Hey, just adding on to that a little bit, Gaurav, with your Iron Man metaphor, it's an intelligence amplifier with both AI and Gen AI. So if you're not a finance person, it won't make you a finance person. If you're not a programmer, it won't make you a programmer. But the extent of that application, I don't think is well understood yet.
Yeah, terrific. And we're going to come back to a lot of the use cases because I want to get a little bit more explicit around what you guys are seeing there. But maybe I'll bring it to Beth for a moment. And just given your focus on AI for Citizens, just talk a little bit about the journey that Citizens is on around artificial intelligence. What's your perspective on the topic? And then where does Citizens fall into the adoption spectrum in your view?
Yeah, so we've been on a multi-year journey on AI, much like we've been talking about here for the industry as a whole. So over the last kind of 5 to 7 years, we've been doing a lot of work on what I'll call traditional AI in places like RPA and automating operations and doing repetitive tasks, and some of our fraud and collections work to make sure we're more successful on that key part of the banking value streams, on personalization and offering things that are highly applicable to our customers. I will say where the real shift has happened is, again, over the last year, we've started to test, to learn, to really build our capability. To Gaurav's point, we thought it was really important on the Gen AI side to not wait. So how do we start to bring together the right multidiscipline teams? So that includes both data scientists and technologists, but also risk partners within Citizens to make sure we understand the models and what it means for us. Our HR partners to understand what it means for our workforce and our future and our culture, as well as our broad business partners to say, let's ensure in cybersecurity, for example, to say, let's ensure we understand how can we start to test and learn. And a technology we believe really will change the way many of our roles operate today. And then we took an approach where we really said, okay, there are probably going to be a couple different ways of implementing with that team. Some we're going to build. And for us, build, by the way, does not mean build your own large language model. That is not, we are not of that scale. Probably nobody on the phone is of that scale, but you build a direct connection to an OpenAI through Microsoft or through one of the Amazon models. There is a partner. So we're listening to a lot of vendors on their tools like a Salesforce or an Adobe or others, or a desktop. So how do you think about what Microsoft is putting on your desktop to be that coach to each and every one of us? And we want to have a portfolio of tests in place to figure out how over the next 2-3 years do we accelerate our use of this new technology and really change the way we can deliver for our business, for our customers, but also from a productivity lens across the business.
Great. Bill, would you add anything from a Citizens perspective?
It's an exciting journey. I think ultimately, at the end of the day, there's a world of enthusiasm and even some hype. So what's critical is to find that sweet spot where you have a senior business partner who will pound the table and say, if we solve this, they'll embrace it. And it's aligned with what the data scientists, the technologists, the risk folks are all saying. We can produce quality results with a business impact.
Yeah.
And maybe just to get specific for you, Devin, for this group, like many, we started with a list of 90 use cases that our businesses were excited about. And then we said, well, we got to get that down to what we can really test. And we had a couple of criteria. One was around, is it scalable? So how do we think about the ability to move from project to project? Another was, is there a human on top of the AI? And I know we're going to talk about risks later, but we didn't want to just jump into something that was going to be direct to our customers. And then we kind of said, let's go from there. So we are starting with a prototype this month in our contact centers and in some of our customer service, where we really thought about how do you rethink that process, as well as areas like Code Assist to help our developers. So we were, very thoughtful about that jump in approach.
Terrific. Yeah. And I think the use case is really the meat here that I think people are going to want to hear about, where we're applying it as a bank and other use cases outside. And so the survey showed that companies are currently using AI from everything from cash flow forecasting to customer support to fraud detection. We know there are many more applications as it relates to organizations' financial management. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the practical applications of AI today, and then I guess also some of the areas that you guys are most excited about as being on the forefront of looking at use cases both today, but also use cases that, as we know, this technology is evolving so fast, kind of where we're going here over the next couple of years. So Beth, you just gave a couple, but maybe Beth and Bill hit on a couple more that we're focused on here at Citizens, and then we can hear from Gaurav around some of the investments that he's making in his portfolio as well.
Sure. Beyond what we see here with the cash flow, financials, payments, customer, there's price optimization, next best offers, predicting the nature of inbound calls, and there's the whole set of opportunities within generative AI. So it's within the generative AI. Beth talked about knowledge management. There's a world of opportunity, we believe, in sales effectiveness too. So the other thing, Devin, that I think is fascinating from this, the first three use cases on the left have a finance orientation to them. There's also some that have a customer orientation, customer support, engagement, fraud detection. I think finance plays a critical role across all of these to prioritize, catalyze, mobilize, and ultimately monetize these use cases and applications.
Yeah, maybe I'll just bring one to life because I know we do want to get into specifics for folks. And I thought this was a great example. Now we're on this journey, but this was also actually a utility company that I was experience sharing with. So on their contact center journey, their customer support journey, they really laid out the value chain of what happens when a customer needs to contact their contact center, and how do they make that process much more effective for their customers, while at the same time taking out 50% of the costs. And they've already started to stop hiring open positions. So I found that really interesting. And they've used their Gen AI tools in a couple of ways to start. But they have also used traditional analytic methods and then just re-engineering as well. So they first thing they did was take all the calls that come in. They simply translated the talk to text. We've all had that for a long time. It's built into many systems. And then they used Gen AI to do summarization. So they said, through summarization, can I figure out the top 11 reasons why or 12 reasons why people are calling? They are using a direct-to-consumer chatbot then. They took Gen AI, but they believe they could do it in a way that wasn't risky to just answer those 12 questions for customers when they come in. So if you're in that pool, you go to something that sounds like a voice, that sounds like a human that can answer that question. If you're not in that pool of 12 things they know they have strong answers for, they still send you to an agent. That agent then is sitting with a Gen AI tool underneath it to do knowledge management, as we talk about, which is to easily find answers among all their pages and pages and pages of documentation and handbooks and where to find answers to questions, but get it seamlessly and very quickly so that they're able to, one, answer more questions and answer them faster. And what they're finding is their customers are really happy because they're getting better answers faster, and they're much more productive, and their agents are happier because they're doing more and they're having more ability to serve those customers. So I think it was just a good example of thinking across the value chain. Some of the tools are Gen AI, some aren't, some are traditional AI, some are just simple process re-engineering, but it really was a way to re-engineer a value chain using these tools that I think can really resonate and we all can learn from.
What makes that in part a very compelling use case is it's blending together existing and proven methods along with the new methods of Gen AI. And it plays to the strength of generative AI and large language models while bounding the space that the models have to work in. So the path to quality is real, tangible, and achievable.
Gaurav, so you're investing in some of the most innovative companies in the space today. So maybe talk a little bit about the investments that you're making, and then also where you're seeing the most uptake in those companies, and then also the types of investments that you're looking at right now that I'm assuming are kind of even the next iteration of some of the use cases that could be exciting. And really we can go across industries. We're talking about some of the financial applications, but love to just get kind of broader insights as well from you.
Yeah, it's a great question, Devin. I mean, first and foremost, I would say that, we are very focused on looking at AI applications that solve real problems an order of magnitude better and deliver a business ROI that can be measured in weeks and months, not quarters and years. And I think, what you're seeing with, including the examples that Beth mentioned, is precisely that, which is these are real business ROI opportunities, right? Where the payoff is not in the far distant future, but can be realized much more immediately. And I think that is what makes generative AI specifically, and AI more broadly, very compelling for enterprise use cases. Broadly, I'd say we see, the way we look at it is four major pillars in terms of how AI is adding value to businesses. So one is automation of certain tasks, which includes, this generation, ideation, repetitive, as you mentioned, Beth, RPA, which is robotic process automation of very repetitive and tedious tasks. The second is augmentation, meaning things like insights, summarization, the ability to extract vast amounts of information from large data sets, whether it's for customer service, sales or marketing, personalization for a prospect, or for financial analysis. The third is personalization, which is, we live in a world where increasingly businesses want to deliver personalized experiences because it's better for business. Well, and that could be to their employees or to their customers. And certainly with Gen AI, you're seeing the ability to develop through massive data sets to be able to deliver that personalization. And then I think the fourth, very, very profound, is that Gen AI has redefined the user interface paradigm. Many years ago, we went from command line interface to the graphical user interface. So command line was if you've ever used a command line interface, first of all, sorry. Second, it's, how limiting it can be. But the graphical user interface opened up the PC to a mass audience, which CLI could never have done. Well, guess what? Even graphical user interfaces are pretty complex. Every time Microsoft changes its Office suite, a lot of people complain that they can't find their usual menus because there's literally thousands of commands built into that ribbon. But what Gen AI has done is this taken us to the next level, from GUIs, the graphical user interface, to the natural language interface. And what could be easier than natural language as a user telling software what it is that you want to accomplish in everyday language? So this is a huge paradigm shift, and it's going to lead to a step function change in the usability of new technologies within the enterprise and reducing the learning curve. Our investments, broadly embrace kind of, we're very fortunate that when we built Omega, I was able to recruit as my co-founders two of the foremost experts in the world on AI, who are serial entrepreneurs. So we formed a very complementary group with both the operational and entrepreneurial company building side, as well as the investment side, given my 20 years of tenure in this industry. But I'll talk to a few use cases across our investments. Number one, and I'll just mention that each of them speaks to a real problem in addressing a very real problem in enterprise AI adoption and getting value out of it. So beyond just novelty and experimentation, I'm talking about real ROI. Number one, we're investors in a company called DataRobot. That is the leader today in democratizing AI across the enterprise. And the problem they're really solving is a one-stop shop where you can build your model, you can test your model, you can put your model in production, and you can iterate on it. The key issue is reliability. For those of you who've used GenAI, you know that it can be very convincing, but entirely wrong. And that's a major problem. We don't want in businesses to be making fundamental mistakes that kind of compound as they move down the value chain. So accuracy, and this is to your point, Beth, Bill, where you said, you do need some level of domain expertise today to be able to gauge whether the output you're getting from GenAI is truthful and accurate. I call that a reliability problem. GenAI still hasn't figured out how to say, I don't know. It still hasn't figured out saying, I don't know, but let me find out and get back to you. It still guesses. And so DataRobot is solving the reliability problem by making it very transparently understandable to you as an enterprise or corporation, how your model is generating the output it is and how that translates back into your data. Now, speaking of data, many companies don't have the data. So another example I'll illustrate is we invested in a company called Elemental Machines. And what Elemental Machines does is they digitize the operations of life sciences. So if you're in a life sciences environment, a lot of the stuff you do is in fragmented silos and systems. And a lot of it may not even be digitized. So for example, think about developing the COVID vaccine. So you required a whole bunch of instrumentation from making sure things were stored at the right temperatures, to ensuring how long they were on the shelf, to what was the chain of custody, to what was the humidity level in the environment, to think regulatory compliance, capacity utilization of your equipment, operational optimization of your staff, which are scientists and very expensive. All of this data sits in a cluster of different people and machines in a typical lab. And Elemental Machines ties it all together through a system that allows you to get one single unified dashboard of your life sciences operations so that it lays the foundation to then get actionable insights from the data using AI. So we think that enabler, by the way, to get data digitized is also really important, because if you don't have the data, AI can be garbage in, garbage out. And the third final example I'd mention is, we are investors in a company called Kofax, which is a leader in content-intensive workflow automation. So what that means is that whether it's loan underwriting or mortgage underwriting, or think about even financial process reconciliation or supply chain management, there's a ton of contents that flows through it. In loan underwriting, it might be underwriting related data. In supplier management, it might be things like invoices, vendor ESG ratings, their sanctions checks. Well, Kofax is able to apply this next generation generative AI to augment the user through Copilot, making it much easier for people to adopt their solution without necessarily being expert programmers. Secondly, and this is key, they already have a massive customer base of global Fortune 100 companies, and they have demonstrated that they're a great partner, that they understand enterprise compliance, security, the importance of PII, and have access to the behind-the-core firewall data. And the point I'm trying to make is that is a great example where generative AI has been adopted by Kofax to up-level and amplify the value that they bring to their customer, but it also underscores the importance of distribution. One of the things with all these new AI ideas is we think a lot of them are going to struggle to get distribution. Getting distribution is expensive. I mean, I'm sure Beth gets pitched half a dozen ideas every hour, and so it's hard to kind of break through the noise. And we see a lot of value in companies that have that trusted enterprise relationship and track record that can now elevate the capability and the value they deliver to you by incorporating GenAI. So let me pause there for a moment. I mean, those are some examples. I mean, I'd say we invest in 1 out of about 500 or so companies that we evaluate. So our bar tends to be high, and we tend to be very deep in this sector. And we look for a lot of alignment to happen before we decide to partner with a company. But when we do, of course, then we're all in.
Terrific. Beth, maybe just to bring it back to you briefly before we move on, when we talk about ROI at the business level, is the ROI being driven by primarily efficiency, or do we see kind of revenue uplift opportunities as well? How do we think about right now where AI is really driving the most value, operationally for the firm? And then, as we move on from here, is it an expense and efficiency dynamic, or is it something that can drive revenues as well?
Yeah, I think it's both. So we certainly think about AI as a way to drive, I'll even say productivity versus just efficiency improvements. But we think there's real dollars there. And what that's going to enable us to do is invest more dollars in other areas that add value to our customers and enable us to grow. But that said, I think Gaurav and Bill both gave examples on personalization as well. So there are AI tools which enable us to better understand our customers, better respond to our customers, do it in a more personalized way at scale. So I can use Gen AI tools to help craft emails, whether I'm an RM in commercial or whether I'm doing it at mass in the consumer bank at a level that I couldn't do if I had to have copywriters writing all that, or we had to have bankers doing draft after draft, because I can do that at scale and I can do it in a controlled way as well, ensuring I have the right risk controls that just, provide revenue upside as well as that efficiency savings. But I do think it's important that it also just frees up time for people to focus on the tasks that matter. One of the things I was able to do is join at OpenAI at the end of the summer, and that was sort of a fun thing to be in their offices. But even at that time, they gave us a great example where they just, to Gaurav's part on the interface, so just so everybody understands the difference, they basically just said, in voice, because their first thing was voice to text, calculate Apple's EBITDA for 2022, and it did it, right? And we could all do that. It's just EBITDA is not that easy to find. You have to go through the financials. You have to look in some of the footnotes. You calculate EBITDA. We all did it as analysts early in our career, but it did it in 5 minutes. And then once it did it for 1 year and we actually checked and we made sure it was right, then, the person doing the example said, okay, now do it for the last 5 years and graph it. So in about 7 minutes, you had the perfect graph presentation of Apple's EBITDA over 5 years. That's not rocket science. That's not something that's highly predictive data science that you need a, advanced math degree to do. But boy, does that free up your time if you're that first year or second year analyst that's doing that for their boss versus what we do today, where you have to hunt and peck and it takes you a day to provide that slide. So that's the kind of things where I think immediately you're more productive. So that's efficiency, but it also enables you to spend your time with a client or on value added work or doing something it's going to drive revenue in the organization.
And adding on to Beth's example just a little bit, you can take that EBITDA, spread it across n number of companies equally as fast, and then transform the way you think a little bit. You can ask these great tools, these amazing tools, to say, summarize an earnings call, summarize a 10K, 10Q, or what is missing, or what has changed quarter over quarter and how this company is signaling to the market. So it's going to be, I think, ubiquitous in the way that, imagine today, we didn't have the internet. It's become so ubiquitous in our day-to-day. In the few years out, we'll think of that with AI and Gen AI.
I would just add to that, Devin, that this is why reliability is such a core consideration, right? Because the problem is what Beth and Bill are absolutely right in terms of highlighting the capability and how much, and boy, we've all been there at the beginning of our careers, and having that capability could be the difference between getting 4 hours of sleep and getting 8 hours of sleep. When you're working as an analyst at a bank. But reliability is critical because you also don't want to be the analyst who shows wrong numbers. And I think today the issue is that these systems are not that reliable. We've all seen AI hallucinate. We've all seen it getting things wrong. The architecture of these models lends itself to statistical interpolations, and they can make things up that sound entirely plausible and convincing. So I think it's that reliability gap needs to be addressed. And I think, from our perspective of as investors, one of the ways we see it as a way to bridge the gap is solutions that are specific in the problem they're solving. So then, for example, what we call very smart, narrow AI. So whether it's applying it to customer service or sales and marketing or risk and fraud optimization, we think those narrower solutions can have better guide rails to engender trust and credibility in their responses. Because without that, enterprises will always be double checking everything the AI says, and that's going to be a lot of time.
Absolutely. And so I think good place to pivot here a little bit just to the potential risks. I think we're talking about a lot of the good things that will come from AI, but there's also risks in terms of how it's applied. And the Citizen Survey did show that both mid-sized companies and PE firms have similar concerns with legal and compliance issues currently leading kind of the pack on the risk factors. So Bill, maybe you can just hit really briefly whether you think those concerns are warranted and how you're thinking about some of the risks with AI today.
Yeah, you bet, Devin. The short answer is absolutely they are warranted. And Beth and Gaurav had touched about having some of the stakeholders at the table. I think what's absolutely critical is a responsible AI framework covering things like regulatory, legal, compliance, info security, data privacy, bias and fairness, operational, reputational risks, model governance. So having that framework is critical. It's a big part of our day-to-day here, having the right stakeholders at the table, and ultimately success in part beyond the economics is that broad diversity of stakeholders embrace what we're doing. And we've got the framework as guardrails in place to protect us.
Great. So to close out here, Beth, would be great if you could just summarize for everyone on the line what you would recommend for them, how they should be focused on kind of a plan for implementation of artificial intelligence within their organizations.
I think the best advice I have and the best advice I've gotten on this is to just be testing, be learning. Don't just wait thinking this is going to be 2 to 3 to 4 years out. And I think, Gaurav, you hit on it earlier in the conversation. Everybody should be starting to use these tools. You don't have to be a data scientist to do them. They are coming. They don't have to be part of every process, but you definitely want your colleagues starting to learn what is this new interface going to look like for how we're interacting with these tools and these models. And there are lots of ways to do that, whether that's at home when you're playing around with ChatGPT, if you can find some ways to start to use the tools on the desktop or in your everyday space. You're going to want to do it because it is going to impact and start to differentiate companies that can and companies that can't. Be smart and thoughtful about the way they leverage these tools and know how to put the protections in place to use them effectively. So I guess my biggest advice is just start testing, start using, and embrace it and learn more about it.
That's terrific. And just from my seat here, I want to add that, Citizens more broadly, we have teams of people focusing on this topic, as you can tell from Beth and Bill, but across the organization, the consumer bank, the commercial bank, within equity research in my department in investment banking, this is obviously a thread throughout the organization. So feel free to reach out to your Citizens colleague, and we'd love to work with you around ways that we're thinking about it, but also ways to potentially help your business. With that, I think we are going to, in the remaining few minutes here, try to take a couple of questions that came in. So with that, let me turn it back over to Brandy, and hopefully we can get a couple questions in.
Thank you, Devin. If you guys want to add a question, you can type it in the chat. We have one pre-submitted question that I can go ahead and tee up for you guys, and that's, what factors will Citizens use in 2024 to determine the priority of AI projects? Can you provide examples of projects that will take priority?
I'm happy to jump in there, Brandy. I think we already hit on it a little bit, but what we're really focused on is launching, in addition to some of the traditional AI methods that we talked about, is launching some in production use cases with new Gen AI tools that are both safe and follow our AI framework, but also can leverage into multiple use cases. So knowledge management will launch in the contact center with a tool this year, but then we can use it, you know, across other businesses, across HR, across our internal IT groups. We're looking at summarization and how do you start to build on that? Code Assist is another one. If anybody's not using it, we're looking to really launch and understand, can we make our developers more productive in the way they deliver code? And so the goal is to be both scalable and to drive real impact and learn over the course of the year so that as we go into 2025, believe it or not, you know, we've got scale impact across Citizens. Bill, anything you'd add?
Yeah, totally. The human on top, Beth, there's two ways to think of this. You mentioned this previously. There's human on top of AI or AI on top of human. Point of sale with a credit card is AI on top of human. What we're focusing on with the generative AI is human on top. Another great criteria to learn with is the public domain. What is data information in the public domain? You might want to summarize, you might want to tease out. Lead generation are all fabulous opportunities to both learn and drive value. And ultimately, to connect it back to business strategy, what is the compelling question you want the AI or generative AI to answer? And do you have a business stakeholder who's pounding the table to say, if you solve this, if you answer it, I'll embrace it.
Great. We do have another question that came in through the chat. How is Citizens using Gen AI as it relates to communications?
Beth, you want to answer that? You want me to?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to. I mean, so what we're starting out to do now is just test on how can you think about first drafts of different kinds of content creation through Gen AI. There are a lot of vendors that are coming to us with tools that are suggesting that they can do that. We're being pretty thoughtful as we implement to the points earlier that Gaurav made around reliability. But I would expect we'll have more and more of that over the course of the year, because what it allows us to do is generate content at scale and make it really, really personalized. So we can make everybody more productive. We can just be more relevant, more content, better communications, and ensure that we're meeting the needs of our colleagues and our customers faster and easier. By the way, that's probably one of the topics where I did tell Barb I got 3 calls this morning from vendors around tools. That's one of them where there are a lot of players that are pitching different solutions, and I would expect us to leverage tools versus build in that case.
Okay, we have probably time for one more question, and it is, where do you think AI adoption will be in 5 to 10 years?
I think that could be a 20-minute conversation in itself. But Gaurav, maybe if you want to take a quick stab at that.
Yeah, I mean, boy, 5 to 10 years is an eternity in this space. We're measuring iterations here in months, not even quarters. Every 2 months, the world changes, right? With the level of improvements and just the sheer velocity of acceleration you're seeing in the space. Now, I will say, back in 2020, when we launched Omega, AI had already exceeded or matched human capabilities in language comprehension, language translation, handwriting recognition, speech to text. People don't know that, right? Because what happened is ChatGPT kind of democratized this. So as a result, a lot of folks, which is great for the industry because it's drawn in the talent, the attention, it's provided the activation energy to start having these conversations at the board level. They need to happen. Because this is a matter of if you want to make sure your company has a competitive and sustainable advantage, if you're not using AI and your competition is, you're going to be driving a horse and buggy to race against a jet fighter, and that's not a race that's winnable with a horse and buggy. So I think, where does this go? So first of all, I think in the near term, we're going to continue seeing enterprises use both generative AI as well as your classic predictive AI. The classic predictive AI, which does things like predictions, forecasting, classifications, and generating, detecting patterns out of large data sets, is still very indispensable. Gen AI can complement that in many ways, along all the dimensions we discussed: usability, usefulness, versatility of use case. I think the language models themselves will start to, it's a game of scale as they continue. But by the way, it's also very expensive, as you correctly noted, Beth. By 2030, to build a foundation model, it's going to cost you $500 million just to build it. And then there's the cost of operating it. So I think those LLMs will continue to become better and better. But I do think we will see some new emergent capabilities also come up. So what this means is it's really hard to take a 5-year or 10-year perspective. What I can tell you is no, AI is not going to achieve consciousness and try to kill humanity. There's nothing about the architecture of these models that would even remotely suggest that. That is media sensationalism at its best, and its worst perhaps. So it's not going to become Terminator. It doesn't even have that capability, not to mention any desire or motivation. And there's no architectural aspect to that. But it will continue to improve. So as the advice we give all our portfolio companies is iterate rapidly, focus, define outcomes, as I think somebody also noted earlier, that figure out what it is that you want to achieve, and then do organizational adoption and change management is not to be underappreciated either in actually deploying these technologies. You've got to make sure that not only key stakeholders, but everyday people are on board with this, that they understand the impact it's going to have on their jobs. And you've got programs in place to upskill and reskill people so that it's a net positive. And this thing has the potential to be a net positive for us, meaning us as a society, us as a nation, us as a democracy and a bastion of liberal freedom values in a very complicated world, to be a competitive driver for the foreseeable future. So I think we're going to see anything I will predict right now will be an understatement for 5 to 10 years. But I think this, it's very clear. This is real. It's here to stay. It's going to get much better than we think we can possibly predict today in the next 10 years. And it's imperative to start adopting it and surround yourself with people who can give you an unfair advantage in information, insight, and acumen to help inform that adoption.
Hey, Devin, 3 quick things just to add on. One is 5 years out, I feel confident it will be ubiquitous. 2, everyone who's in any type of knowledge role today, whether it's finance, accounting, legal, should be strategizing about the value stream, use cases, and what role you're going to play. And the last thought, for me at least, is the pieces of it that are hard to imagine today. When the internet first came out, I personally never would have dreamed of a YouTuber. There's going to be fundamental shifts, and what those are will be massively game changers and massive value creators and value destroyers too. So that's going to be fascinating to see play out.
Yeah, maybe I'll just add real quick because I saw another question pop up, and as we were going through this, I like my co-panelists and just a huge believer in this technology, and it's going to move fast, and we should all think about how to leverage it appropriately. The question was also, how do you think about, Bill, you just mentioned it, malware, fraudsters, what it could mean for them. It does make that a more challenging environment, much like we've seen in the past. So as we said at Citizens, we have our cybersecurity experts and others working right alongside us to make sure we are protecting ourselves as we think about what this technology can enable. I am a fan, by the way, if all of you don't know it, is that you should have a family password, because it can imitate a voice. It can pretend it's me if you ever speak publicly and call your mother and sound like you. So there are some dangers to this technology as well. But I think the positive well outweighs some of those, but we should know about it. You should educate yourselves and your companies and prepare for it.
Really just want to thank everyone for joining us here. Great discussion, obviously terrific panelists. And so look forward to continuing the discussion with you around this important topic. Please reach out to your Citizens representatives if you have questions or just want to connect and talk more about the topic. So thanks again for joining. In the meantime, please complete our post-event survey. You can point your camera at the screen, and we would appreciate that as well. So thanks again, everyone, and hopefully look forward to connecting on this topic again soon in the future.
Great to be here.
Thanks, everyone. That concludes our call. You may now disconnect.